So KCP says that they might have gone just a bit too hard at the end of the season. How might they have played out things a little bit differently as the season went on? And y'all, we're joined, as you can see, by some very special guests. We're going to talk a lot about some Denver Nuggets basketball, including about Christian Braun, Calvin Booth's comments on KCP and Christian Braun. Is it going to be that easy of a transition, y'all? Y'all know what time it is. This is Locked On Nuggets. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome into Locked On Nuggets. This is your host, Swipa. This is your team every day. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. Y'all, we've had some great content coming out this week already, so we got some great stuff ahead for you in this episode. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff to tap into, y'all. But you already know, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, as you can see, usually Thursdays it's just going to be me, but I just felt in my spirit, deep down in my spirit, that Denver Nuggets fans needed to hear a little bit more from some very up-and-coming newcomers on the scene that are already making great, and I mean great content on their own. Y'all, we have the one, the only, living legends already, Grace and Will. Y'all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Swipa.
Yo, I'm not going to lie. So I have been thinking about this for a while now, and actually Matt had beat me to it bringing Grace on, but when I saw y'all pop up on the timeline the first time, I was like, oh yeah, like I already know, like we're going to have to do some content together. We need to get on the show. I think the people love y'all already. I think the kind of content you're making, and I remember when I first saw your first video, I was like, oh, that's kind of giving me like some, like some Harry Potter vibes a little bit. Like I like the show format. That feels good to me.
Just nerdy vibes as much as possible.
Yeah, it was funny when we started the pod. Will and I quickly found out that we were both kind of English nerds, and so we liked the idea of a sort of Shakespearean kind of theme and vibe for the show.
I love that. Well, look, we might have to do a separate literature vibe at some point because I love talking literature and books. That's right up my alley. But y'all, we got to tap into what's happening right now with KCP's comments, because I don't know if y'all saw, but KCP has some really interesting things to say. And again, if Denver Nuggets fans, if you haven't seen it, you can go to my page, go to Swipa Cam's page, and you can go ahead and look at it and be like, look, KCP has some of the things about to say how they ended the season. At the end of the year, y'all, everybody remembered All-Star break. I want to say they went like 23-5 or something like that, like some crazy record post All-Star, and they just really just tapped into it all the way. They were fighting for that number one seed, and they just looked like a team that was just about his business. But KCP gave us some insight that they think they might have exhausted themselves as they were pursuing the number one seed, which then in turn even affected the series versus the LA Lakers that they won 4-1. And KCP went as far as to say he thinks the Lakers could have beaten them. Yo, I'm not gonna lie.
He said that the team thought they should have.
Right. And for me, that is just like insanity because one, they had already beaten 12 straight tops. Like, so you get to that point, y'all. So Will and then Grace, when you heard those comments by KCP, what first came to mind for you?
To me, it was just like happy that someone was that transparent about it, especially a player. I mean, KCP was like really eloquent. Yeah, he was really eloquent with those comments, and we had heard that from Booth and Malone in the postseason presser too, so it wasn't necessarily surprising, but it was just good to get some confirmation on the inner workings of how that all ended up. But I was like also just regretting like, okay, so you guys pushed for it, which was a debate that all fans were having and people associated with the team, pushing for the one seed, whether that was worthwhile, and then didn't get there. Like, so if we did get there and you're aligned better with matchups and like home court and we avoid the Lakers and the Wolves, maybe we go further in the playoffs. I'm not sure. Who knows what we do if we match up with the Celtics in the finals. I like Jokic in that matchup too, but I was just like, dang, we didn't even get there. So
Yeah, no, when I first heard the comments, it was very like, oh, yep, this is exactly what I felt at the time. That is when they were pushing for the 1 seed. The post All-Star period that you're talking about, they absolutely looked dominant. But down the stretch of the season is when you saw that they were running out of gas. And I was kind of joking at the time that the Thunder and the Wolves were sabotaging the Nuggets every time they dropped a game because they kept leaving the 1 seed within reach so that the Nuggets weren't like shutting things down. Now, I was always in favor of like, let's try to lock in a top 3 seed, like no reason to fall to 4. And the Clippers were still sort of nipping on everyone's heels at that point. But once that was locked up, I really wanted them to shut it down. But again, it was just like, it was like Lucy with the football was the 1 seed. And yeah, the Thunder and the Wolves just kept like, okay, it's like right there, it's close. And everyone talks about game 80 with the Spurs, but really, like, I thought that they should have been shut down by that point. Even I don't think that the team was even talking down the stretch about how health was like the most important thing going into the playoffs. And I'm like, these guys are liars. Malone is a liar. Athletes are liars because they were playing and they were playing hard every game, as much energy as they could give at that time. You could see them starting to burn out. So I just think that those comments from KCP reiterate and reemphasize something that everyone's been talking about since the end of the season, how gassed they were through the first round where they beat the Lakers somehow, but they didn't look great. And then the Wolves series happened the way that it did. And it leads me to believe that the team is going to be intentionally taking a different approach next season.
Right. Yeah. And I think that at the time, somebody, by the way, the What's in the Game podcast, y'all, Grace and Will, shout out, really just a few months old, but already doing big numbers. So appreciate y'all coming on again today. I think here's the thing with the end of the season stuff. I got the logic of chasing the 1 seed. And I think some of this, though, is going to be Malone's philosophy, where we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be able to look at the team and say, all right, we're going to talk about this a little bit, but they got depth. They got players on the roster. They have a lot of different kinds of variations they can use with this, as opposed to last year. They just felt more limited in what they were going to do. It felt as if they were in a situation where they were looking at the starters. They're saying, we're so young on the back end with Jalen Pickett, Julian Strawther, Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, a bunch of youngins that they just didn't want to throw them into the lineup enough. But whereas this year coming up, I think they're going to have to take a chance with that. But look, at the end of the year, y'all, Matt Moore, shout out to Matt Moore, because he was the first one on this. He said that he thinks this is going to hurt them in the long run. I remember telling him, like, man, I don't know. Yeah. Like, it's just, you kind of have to do it at this point. Like, but we see, like, the 5th seed made the NBA Finals. So it really ultimately didn't end up mattering all that much, and everything's about matchup. And I truly, Grace, had they, instead of won 57 games, if they would have won 51 games, and they would have had basically 6 games the last couple of weeks where they just took everybody out and said, look, we're just going to sit, we're going to rest, we're not going to try to push forward. Do you feel like that would have had a difference on the outcome of the season? Maybe by the time they get to the Lakers series, to the Wolves series, and then into the finals, that a couple more weeks of rest would have helped them in the long run?
I do believe that, because I think that, despite even the matchup issue that the Wolves present for the Nuggets, they were up 20 in the second half of a game 7 and they just couldn't keep it up. Right. Like, I don't think that, I think the 23 team was, like, in my mind, it was very matchup proof. Like, I don't think there's any team in the league that could beat them. Right. But even in their, reduced capacity, I thought that they should have been the favorites to win the title, but they didn't have health. We had KCP banged up. We had obviously Jamal with the calf thing. And they didn't have the energy. And part of why they were, I think, even more gassed down the stretch while pressing than, maybe they would have been, is because Jamal was like in and out of that lineup, which put more on everybody else. So they were pressing even more while trying to press for the 1 seed. Not getting that rest they needed. So it was just I think it was complicated, and I get it. Like, these guys are all competitors. That's why I talked about the athletes and Malone, right? Everybody wants to win. And that's a great, culture to have in this team. But I do think that sometimes these guys need to be put in a straitjacket and, save from themselves a little bit, because the goal is the championship, right? Like, they've already proven that they can be a 1 seed. They proved that they could win games on the road in the regular season. They proved that they could win games on the road in the playoffs.
Right.
So I don't think that they should have been pressing for home court as much as they did.
Right. Well, look, on the other side, y'all, we're going to talk about, can they avoid this issue next year by having maybe a little bit more depth than they had this season. We're going to talk about all that and more in segment 2 here on Locked On Nuggets. Now, look, I don't know about y'all, but I'm a person, I love going to sports venues. I love going to events. I'm a comedy fan, so, you know, put me up. Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, whatever. I'm trying to hop in. And Gametime is such a convenient app for me because when I want to go to a Braves game, I want to go to a Hawks game here in Atlanta, then I want to make sure I'm getting the best deals and the best prices possible. Now, a lot of y'all, if you're looking to find a place where you can get the seats that you want at the price that you want, and then being able to even look on the app and see the venue and the spot you're going to be looking from, this is the place to be. And if you're a Colorado Rockies fan, this is the best place to get MLB tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Y'all, we'll be right back for more here on Locked On Nuggets. What's going on, y'all? We are back here for segment 2 of Locked On Nugget. This is your host, Swipa, joined by Grace and Will, podcast host for What's in the Game. And y'all, make sure, if you're on the YouTube side, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the video. That way we can continue to grow the YouTube community here at Locked On Nuggets. And if you're listening to this on the audio side on Apple iTunes, give us a 5-star review so we can bring more great people like Will and Grace onto the show. So, y'all, let's just ask the bare question, because I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, some in the NBA, a lot of fans, some of my friends. Do y'all think that the Denver Nuggets, based on the adjustments they've made, the addition to the roster, even taking in account the KCP loss, do you think that this is a better overall team than it was last season at this point?
I think it's tough to say that it is when you lose KCP, and the starting lineup was one of the best starting fives in the league when we won it all.
Yeah.
But maybe you could say the approach might be more measured than it was in this last run, because I like that KCP in his comments said they still saw themselves as a title contender and that they could still do it. I mean, we were top heavy, and it's not necessarily the most sustainable structure for a team competing for multiple titles. We saw that it was actually with the championship run, that window where we were kind of resting for the 1 seed, that may have helped us be at our being able to flip that switch when it was not really a reality we were going to flip the switch last season. So I'm hoping that, like, with the depth on paper with Saric and Westbrook and the guys like Straw, they're hopefully taking a leap, that the plan that Booth has in place to kind of break KCP, even though, like, we just lost him for nothing, but the plan is we kind of, like, are sacrificing him to get some extra pieces to make sure our top 4 are in peak condition at the right time. We still have a chance to compete. I mean, it's Jokic, and if Murray is playing like he was during the title run, we're still good and we have a chance. So I don't know that it's, like, better, but it's just like it's a different approach, different kind of team.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I think about it in 2 different ways, right? There's regular season and for the playoffs. I think for the regular season, we're about the same, right? We make those trade-offs like Will just talked about, where we kind of sacrifice KCP, who I think contributed a lot to why we were such a good defense last season, particularly in the regular season, which definitely helped carry us through some rough offensive stretches, that's for sure. For some more depth, maybe the bench minutes, the non-Jokic minutes are a little bit better because we can maybe blend lineups in ways that make a little bit more sense. I do think for the playoffs that we are a worse team, though. And the reason that I say that is that right now I'm not totally sure about where if we, Russell Westbrook hasn't actually been signed yet. Like, we are still waiting this many weeks out for an official announcement for him to be on the roster. But I'm still not sure how he fits into a potential playoff rotation given his limitations. Like, I just need to see how the team plans to use him before I can make that assessment. I do think that if they are able to figure out ways to keep him on the floor, to figure out ways to have him play effectively next to particularly Jamal, because we know in the playoffs, the rotations get shortened and you need to make sure that all your guys can play together, right? Then I can comfortably say that we're about the same playoff team. So I do think we lose some shooting, but we gain an extra, like, more playable ball handler potentially, right?
Yeah.
But while I do think that they're a worse playoff team now, I think they have the potential to be a better playoff team if even one of Christian, Julian, or Peyton makes some kind of meaningful leap next season. And we can talk about what that would mean for any of them to make a meaningful leap that would contribute to a bigger playoff level impact.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I feel like we are about the same and potentially a little bit worse as a playoff team.
Yeah, I really like that. And I'm a similar boat with this, that for me, the playoffs have become about versatility in the NBA. I mean, you even look at the Boston Celtics this last year, they had 4 guaranteed ball handlers who could create a shot for themselves or other people. And that was like the key for the Nuggets. Bruce Brown, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. You had players that all could do things for themselves and for their teammates. Even Bruce Brown, remember NBA Finals, beating people off the dribble, doing an up and underneath the rim, or even being able to get into a little bit of a step back. Like, that stuff matters. Like, being able to throw dump off passes. And then for me, that's where the Russell Westbrook equation is in this. Once he formally signs, having Russ and Jamal be your lead ball handlers, for me, is going to give them a lot more security. Now, Russ is going to have to obviously play within himself. He did that for large stretches of the year. He can obviously, I'm preparing everybody now, he's going to turn the ball over sometimes. He's going to take bad shots sometimes. It's going to happen, but Russ is going to compete. He's also an extremely intelligent player, and I think for the money he's going to be making, he's going to overshoot that contract about 10 times because he's going to be playing a lot, and especially when Jamal is not in the lineup because he missed 23 games last year. So this team, regular season, Grace, I'm with you. The playoffs, the versatility for me is going to come down to Christian is, I think, going to be about a half a step worse defender, maybe than KCP because of the screen nav, but he's really good on ball. He's really good at the rim, and so he's going to offer some additional guard paint protection similar to Derek White. But the other side of this is, can you make anything but a three-pointer? Like an above the break three. Can you hit a corner three? Can you hit a mid-range shot? Because even I was watching the playoff from 2 years ago just the other day, watching KCP, and KCP would get the ball from Joker, pump fake, one dribble into a spot, pull up. But, and like Christian just doesn't have some of that technical stuff to his game. So he's really going to have to be able to step into that. And, I think this is a good point also to talk about Calvin Booth's comments, y'all. But, Calvin Booth talked about the idea when he did the press conference in the season that if they had to replace KCP with Christian, they're trusting in it because they look at the net rating stuff. And net rating stuff says it's really good. It might only be 100 and some minutes, but it looks good. And so therefore we're going to trust our process. And, y'all brought up something both equally really true, but I think on the other end of this, I like both of you expand here. What do you think a meaningful playoff level difference that there would have to be between Julian Strawther and Peyton Watson's game? What would that have to be for you to look at the team in the playoffs and say, all right, this is a more viable team?
Man, well, Julian's going to have to be more consistent with his shot making across the whole season and be healthy. Yeah. I mean, we saw it in Summer League, thankfully. It's looking pretty good. He got injured and even talked about how that time off really helped him, just like taking the game more. So he's got to get that shot going because he's a scorer. And he can make plays on defense like we saw even when he was injured last year. So I'm excited just for him defensively, even if it's not the best on-ball defense. And then so it's kind of like the opposite with Peyton, where it's like he needs to up that scoring level because if I'm thinking about him on the bench with Russ potentially, and if he's not able to space as much, a little concerned for those types of lineups. But I'm glad to have his defensive playmaking with Russ who also hustles on defense. It's not like he's
Right.
a 0 on D. But P-Watt's going to have to like bring that and not be a liability in terms of fit with Russ. Just to come in and play with those ball handlers so that like the spacing and everything works and we can be cutting and passing like we want to be, because we want to be evolving stylistically and not just be like running pick and rolls with Jokic with these ball handlers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that you made the distinction about what it would mean for them to make a meaningful leap to be playoff contributors, because I think regular season, like I agree with Will, like I just want to see consistency in Julian's shot. I also want to see more consistency in Peyton's shot. Like that's what I think he needs to bring for the playoff rotation. Let's try not to airball misses. Just get a little bit more comfortable with that.
Right.
Regular season, I actually want to see more ball handling from Peyton and Julian. We already saw in Summer League, they were trying to give Julian a few more reps at that. We saw some, interesting flashes of him driving closeouts and beating his man off the dribble and some slashing. It'll be interesting to see if that is able to translate over during the season. But honestly, in terms of just the all-around game, like what I've seen from Julian and what he can do, I actually feel pretty comfortable that as long as he can stay healthy, stay consistent, stay on the floor, and just do what he's been doing, that would be enough to meaningfully improve the playoff rotation. Just because if he is consistent in his shot, then he becomes a meaningful spacer, if literally nothing else. And he's pretty solid in other areas, even if he's not elite at any, one thing besides the shooting. And then, with Peyton, it's the shot, because I think Peyton has so much defensive value that if he can improve in driving closeouts, in corner 3-point shooting, in any aspect of his offensive game to keep him on the floor, that is a massively meaningful leap for the playoff rotation, just because of how valuable he is defensively, both on and off the ball. Just really improves the versatility of any lineup that he's on, that he's in defensively, in a way that could be like a game changer for the lineup for the playoffs.
Y'all, we're going to finish this part of the conversation on the other side, and then we're going to get to some lineups, too, that I think would be really fun and might offer some different looks for the Denver Nuggets this year. We'll talk about all that and more here. Locked On Nuggets. Y'all, we are back here for the final segment here at Locked On Nugget. This is your host, Swipa. This is your team every day, joined by the leaders and podcast hosts of What's in a Game with Grace and Will. I'm already excited for all the future stuff they're going to be doing as well. So I think to wrap up that conversation about the youth movement, y'all, this is to me either going to be the crown of Calvin Booth's Denver legacy or the indictment of his philosophy, because his entire philosophy is built on the fact that we're going to go into the draft at 21 and get Braun. We're going to go into the draft at 30 and get Watson. We're going to go into the draft at 29 and get Strother. We're going to go into the draft and get the Ron Holmes at 22, who obviously tore his Achilles first game in the summer league. But that's it. Like that is his philosophy, saying we're going to go young. The CBA demands it. We're going to stay out of the second apron, and we're going to develop around the players that we have now. But I think some of this comes down to if Peyton, Julian, and Christian in year 3 and 3 and 2 don't make sizable leaps, then what were we doing? I mean, at that point, what is the point of the philosophy? Because if you're saying we're going to invest in young, athletic, one scoring guard, one two-way on-ball defending guard and corner 3-point specialist, hopefully at some point in time in his career, and then one, average 3 points a game at UCLA, but that dude looks like he can be an all-NBA level defender. Let's get him on the team. And he turns into that, but then offensively, he just needs to take leaps, I think, in the half court as a mid-range shooter, which he did at stretches last year, finishing plays as a corner 3-point shooter, and in transition, he can be an absolute nightmare because of how athletic he is, and he was very good at that last year. But if he makes improvements there, then you got something. But this is, for me, the gamble, the dice rolling was all on the youth movement, because that was the way they can internally improve. So if they don't, Grace, what are we doing? I mean, what are we doing if they don't? Like, what's the? Yeah.
So I actually think that Calvin Booth's strategy in principle is, very smart. Like, I think everybody kind of saw the vision of like, let's draft these late first round guys and hope we can get sort of near lottery value. And like, to me, that means like they're definitely NBA rotation players, and potentially one of them is going to make enough of a leap to be a really high impact guy in the playoffs, like delivering 6 starter level, value in that sense. I think the way that, we've sort of seen the pitfalls is when, we have some of these second round picks also on the roster. And I think that having just some kind of cushion, if we don't get the kind of leap from one of the three of Christian, Peyton, Julian that we want, again, in delivering that like 6 starter level value by this point, is like, it just would have been nice to have somebody in one of those other roster spots in terms of like a veteran who could deliver at least guaranteed 6th to 7th man consistency and value. One of the things that I thought would happen this summer if KCP left is that there would be some kind of consolidation trade made to, reduce the youth on the roster by a little bit to, say, upgrade the backup point guard spot. I do think that Russell Westbrook is an upgrade, but it's not to the degree of, like, I know people were talking about something like, like a Dennis Schroeder or like a Bogdan Bogdanovic type, right? Like, that's what I'm talking about in terms of like the backup plan. And that would have made me feel better about, like, even if one of those 3 guys isn't ready to make that 3rd-year leap, we have seen, like, they look like NBA rotation players, at least in a regular season context. Julian, I think, was basically that before he had his knee injury, but he didn't make the playoff rotation. I think that the injury, derailed that. And, Peyton has his offensive limitations as of last season. We haven't seen him be able to make a playoff rotation. Christian is we don't know if you can play in every series guy right now through 2 playoff runs, right? We saw him get benched in the Lakers series, actually, in both of his first 2 years. So we don't know that we have that. When you're talking about a 6 starter, that's somebody that can play in every series.
Right.
And we don't know that we have that on this roster. And so that is where it becomes an indictment of going too far in on the strategy, because we don't have room to bring in another person that could fill that spot of, you can be a 6 starter that will play in every series. Like, we just don't know that we have that on this roster. And now with Christian moving into the starting lineup, we don't know that we have 5 players that can play in every playoff series.
And Grace, to that point you mentioned about upgrading that backup spot, well, again, that's where I think the philosophy of trading Reggie Jackson plus 3 seconds kind of messes that up, where it's like, okay, you have a tradable contract in Reggie, which is why we originally thought you had given him a player option, and then you have an additional with Zeke Naji's contract, and then you would have 3 seconds and a first. So you wanted to go make a move because that's why you're under the second apron, to be able to consolidate some of that, but then they didn't end up doing that. So that was such a salient point, because I think now we're trying to get exactly what the full vision is of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, because it's not even just like going for these rookie scale contracts, trying to get rotation players. It's now we're losing the core of the starting 5, or one of the core of starting 5 from the championship. And then we're trying to promote the whole hierarchy. Christian Braun's now starting, which maybe was a little earlier than I saw when this plan was laid out. And he's like, because Calvin Booth believes in this wholeheartedly. These are some drastic decisions with like the moving off Reggie so hastily, like, and costly, and promoting Christian Braun to a starter already. But he's kind of like getting some vets too, like Saric and Westbrook. So it seems like he's a little bit aware of like that we actually need some plan Bs for this whole operation. So I'm hoping that pays off. Because if it doesn't, like, we may have to lose one of these starters in a trade to kind of retool. Yeah. And I don't want to think about that, because I love all these dudes. But, you got to maximize Jokic's window, which they've said they're committed to, but it's just like we still haven't seen how this goes with this new CBA and this plan. Calvin's either going to look like a genius for kind of moving off KCP and getting close to replicating his value with Christian on defense and somewhat on offense. I don't think he needs to be as high of a level as KCP on offense to still win a championship, but he's still got to be like on par with where he was last year and a little bit better.
Yeah. See, the thing about what I think most about KCP is the Kevin Durant, Devin Booker matchups, the LeBron AD matchups. Remember, they were straight up putting KCP on LeBron at the end of the game in the first round, and then they were putting AG on Anthony Davis at times, and then putting Jokic on Rui. Now with Christian, in some way, that actually becomes more viable just because he's such a bigger guard. And so some of that stuff is going to work really well. And I think that's why when people say, oh, defensively, I'm like, well, defensively, Christian is actually really good. Like, he's so strong and athletic. Like, when he played in Ant, you could just see a difference between him and KCP. But on the other end of this, finishing those plays, and then, KCP didn't shoot well in the playoffs, but making sure you're finishing some of those open three-point opportunities you're going to have is going to be huge, y'all. But y'all, can you give us a little bit of in? So, you all started your podcast, really just a couple months ago. Things seem to be going really well. Can you give us some insight on what made you start the podcast and some stuff that is going to be coming out on your end in the future?
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly that Grace and I, like, our origins are from Nuggets Twitter. So we're active members on Nuggets Twitter. Like, we talk with Swipa and even Matt sometimes. And we're just huge Nuggets fans. We love talking about the Nuggets and trying to learn as much about the game as possible, which is kind of where the name comes from. What's in a game? Just asking questions, going through it, breaking it down, trying to give some clips. And I really love Grace and her insight that she brings. She's a super smart fan.
She loves me.
She brings. I love her basketball commentary and all that. She's awesome. So please follow her. And basically, I just asked her to start up this podcast because she provides a lot of good insight and she's really fun to listen to.
Yeah, I'm really excited for what we have coming down the pipeline. The Olympics are starting actually this weekend, and we have our Olympic preview coming up. We're going to be covering the games, talking a lot about our guys playing in the Olympics with Jokic and Jamal representing Team Serbia and Team Canada. As we get deeper into the depths of the off season, we might get into some philosophical discussions about basketball. We'll do some fun stuff with like team tiers and rankings and all that fun stuff that everybody loves when there's no actual basketball going on. But I've been really excited about how the off-season, content train has been rolling. There's a lot to talk about. It's one of the reasons that the NBA is such a fun league to cover.
Yeah. Facts, y'all. Well, look, that's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Make sure you go to the What's in a Game YouTube channel and subscribe. Make sure you find them on Twitter. Again, Will D. Jones and Aaron Burr 27. And y'all, that's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. I'll see y'all on the other side.